There are hinge moments in life. Like a hinge on a door, these moments in life, it's either going to swing one way or another. The door is either going to swing open, leading you forward in a new way, in a new direction, in a better way, in a better direction, or it's going to slam shut, leaving you stuck with where you're at in life. And you can apply this to your relationships. You can apply it to your individual journey. You can apply it to your professional journey. You can apply it to raising kids. You can apply it everywhere. There are hinge moments in life. And how you respond to hinge moments has a big effect on your future. And we've been talking about running thin. And what that means to be in that margin in between running on full, where you're experiencing peace, where you're experiencing joy, where things are going really well. And yeah, you have some tough times once in a while. Yeah, nothing's ever perfect, but you're filled up. And you're operating from a place where you feel peace and joy and happiness and optimistic about your future and hopeful about what God's doing. Or there's running on empty, burnout, tired, exhausted, struggling to find the source of energy and encouragement to go on tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. And when you're running on empty, everything is harder, everything is tougher. But most of us spend our time in that margin of running thin. Somewhere in between running on full and running out. And in that margin of thin, you have hinge moments. Moments in your life that'll pop up, that'll kind of give you an opportunity to make a change that will drastically affect where you go next and how well you get there. And you have hinge moments. Who knows? Maybe plopping into this service today is your hinge moment. You have hinge moments in your life as you're running thin that will have a big effect on your future. And you have to take advantage of them and follow God through them to the place He is taking you if you want to end up with the fulfillment He promises you in the book of John. Like the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy. We've said that a lot this series. But I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. That's Jesus' purpose for you. And so what you do with these hinge moments, it makes a big difference and they change everything. And you find in Exodus chapter 17 and 18 this kind of like compact couple of passages in the story of the life of Moses. Now, if you don't know Moses, that's okay. Moses was a guy who God had chosen to lead his people, his nation, out of captivity into the promised land, the future that he had for them, the purpose and the meaning he had for his people. And Moses was the guy that God chose, even though he probably wouldn't be the guy any of us would choose, and he definitely wasn't the guy Moses would have chosen. He was God's guy for the job ahead of him. And he had a purpose and a plan for the nation that Moses was going to help lead them to, and he has a purpose and plan for you too. You may not feel it. It may not be on the front side of your brain all the time. You may not wake up thinking about it or pondering God's purpose for your life, but He has a purpose for your life. And when you step into it, you start to experience a level of meaning, a feeling of confidence, a reimagined identity that you never can get on your own. Moses' story in Exodus chapter 17 is one that we could jump into in this little scene where they're out of water on this journey. There were many tough times, many struggles, hardships that they had to deal with as a nation. And in particular, the one at the beginning of chapter 17, they were just out of water. Do you get cranky when you run out of water? I get cranky when I run out. Me and one of my children we're like the worst dehydrated people ever. Like, I'm pretty sure we would never harm anybody unless we were out of water. It's probably a bad thing to admit right now in front of church. I just get cranky. Like, I just need a drink of water. Like, I'll like lap it out of a puddle. I'll get so cranky. Just the dehydration can make you go crazy. The nation was all stirred up. They didn't have water for their livestock. They didn't have water for themselves. They had forgotten that just previous they had been fed manna from heaven. And they had forgotten that if God came through then, he would come through now. That they start this uproar. And they're ready to like stone Moses. Like, hey man, life was better in Egypt. I'd rather be a slave in Egypt than out here thirsty. You know things have gotten bad, right? Like, and you're worried about when Haven shuts down their water for like a day. Like, you know, things at this point are like bad. And Moses cries out to God and says, hey man, like they're ready. He didn't say, hey man, that was me. Just paying attention? What am I to do with these people? They're almost ready to stone me. Lord says to him, he says, go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I'll stand before you and strike the rock, and water will come out for the people to drink. It's this moment where Moses had to be like, yeah, the staff. Okay, that's the staff you gave me. It was the tool you gave me, a demonstration of your power in my life, a demonstration of your presence with me. That was the staff that when I went to Pharaoh and said, hey, you need to let my people go, I threw it down and it turned into a snake and it ate up all the other snakes. That staff is a powerful staff. I remember sticking it in the Nile and the water parting. I remember crossing through on dry land, and you tell me to hit the rock, I'm going to smote that rock with this staff because that's all I need. God, thanks for the reminder. Just you and this sign of your presence and power. He smashes the rock, water flows out. Everybody is like, yes, is not God among us? Like he's here in the room, in the place. We're going to have a party. Everything is kind of great, and then they get attacked. Isn't life like that? You're going through and you're like, man, finally some wins, but then you start like flinching. You know, the phone call rings and you cringe a little bit because you think it's us calling. No, just kidding. You think that like, hey man, some good things are going on and you're just waiting for the next shoe to drop. When's the bad thing going to happen? Things have been too quiet for too long. Things have been going too good for too long. When's the next bad thing going to happen? They go from this place celebrating God with them to being attacked by this group of people called the Amalekites. Now they attack the Israelites. And Moses makes this decision to send Joshua and some men down to fight the Amalekites in the valley. And he decides what any of us would do in this moment. I just need God and this staff. And he tells Joshua, listen, I'm going to go up on the hill while you're fighting in the valley. I'm going to take this staff God's given me, the staff I just hit the rock with, the staff I stuck in the Nile. I'm going to take this tool, this demonstration of God's presence and power in my life. I'm going to hold it up while you fight them down here. Good things are bound to happen. He goes up on the top of the thing. It says this in in Exodus 17 and verse 10. It says, so Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. And as long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, don't read past that. Capture this picture. Moses is on the hill holding up a staff. Joshua's fighting and winning with people Moses loves, with God's people down in the valley. But then he has that like kink in his neck. I wonder what that moment was like. It's a big moment. He's holding everything up. He's holding everything together. Just me and God and what God's given me. Just that. holding it up, and then you try holding something light above your head for the rest of this service. You'll find muscles in your back that you didn't know existed. Light things can become really heavy if you try to keep them above your head for very long. The blood starts rushing out of your arms, your shoulders start to cramp, your neck starts to twinge, your back starts to ache, and eventually your arm starts to drop because it's too much for you to keep holding it all up. I wonder what that moment was like. As Moses stood up there holding the staff, and then all of a sudden he was like, I gotta bring it down a little. But he looks into the valley, and as the staff drops just a little bit because his shoulder's cramping, his back hurts, and his hands are quivering from trying to hold it all together, his people in the valley start falling. This is a big deal. Like, do you get it? They're not down there playing bingo to see who wins the land. They're not down there like, let's chess, Clearly, you need to think 3 moves ahead instead of 2. I rook your king or whatever. I don't know how. I never played chess, as you can clearly tell. They're not down there like, okay, we're going to badminton this one off. Rock, paper, scissors, best out of 5. They're down there warring with each other. So as Moses' hands start to fall, his friends start to die. That's crazy. I can imagine the look on his face the moment he started to realize that. The look of panic and terror. The look of exhaustion as he realizes, I can't let this go. If I let this go, something bad is going to happen to the people I love. I've seen that look. You've seen that look. You've seen that look walking around the grocery store on the face of the mom, running from job to job to job, packing school lunches, waking up early, trying to get the kids off to the bus, get them all showered, get them all clean. She's doing it all by herself, struggling and struggling just to keep up. She feels like she can't stop for a second because if she stops for a second, her kids aren't going to get the future that she wants and hopes for them, the future that's better than the one she had for herself. You can see it on her face. You can see that look on the face of the dad. He's just working so hard, taking every hour of overtime they offer him. Working so hard to get the money they need to just get a little bit ahead of the mortgage, to just get a little bit more saved, just get a little bit more stuff while providing the baseball bats for the kids and doing whatever he can so that his wife and his family can have a better life than the one he had. You can see it on his face. You see it on the face of the grandma. She should be resting. But her kids and their marriage, it's a disaster. And her grandkids stroll home from school into a house full of contention, sometimes full of addiction, full of anger and fighting. And she's tired. But she takes her entire schedule and reorganizes it and changes everything so that she can give those kids a little bit of time and a little bit of space as often as she can to just experience a little bit of peace, praying that their life will turn out a little different. You can see it on the face of the young guy. Coming out of college, he was once certain about what his future would hold, and now he's not so certain. He's struggling to find out what career he needs while wrestling with, did I make a mistake choosing the major I chose? Was that schooling a waste of time? Trying to figure out how he can find somebody to go through life with, to share it with, at the same time trying to figure out all of this other stuff. You could see it on the faces of people who are trying to hold it all together, because they think and feel that if their arm drops a little bit, if they let it go just a little bit, everything's going to start to unravel. And people they love are going to hurt. You can see it on their faces. I've seen it on some of your faces. I've worn it on mine too. Moses, he had that look, but something incredible happens. You see, he thought all he needed was God and him. But as he starts to drop, Aaron and Hur come back into focus. These two guys, seemingly characters that don't even belong in the story. Support staff, not mentioned as a major theme. These two guys, they grab a rock and they prop him up on the rock, giving him a little bit of rest, a little bit of strength, just to keep going a little bit more. And then they do more than that. They grab his hands, one on each side, close to him, and they hold his hands up as long as it takes until the day is done and the battle is won. They hold up the hands of Moses. And Joshua defeats the Amalekites. It's this insane moment where they did whatever they had to do to get their friend through it. And by the way, this isn't the main point in the talk, but a little side note, stop asking people permission to help them. Sometimes you just got to grab the rock and stick it underneath of them and prop it up and say sorry later if you bothered them a little bit. Sometimes you just got to grab their hand before they ask you to grab their hand and just pick them back up, hold them up, encourage them, provide them with a little bit of rest, a little bit of support, a little bit of strength so that they can keep going. Don't ask for permission, just help. You have three things that are so powerful about this moment where the pressure was absolutely insane. And the first lesson we get from this moment is you don't have to keep it all together. I know you think you do. I know you feel like you do. But you're God's kid. And if you're God's kid, then this is also God's problem. It probably felt in the moment his hands were dropping like it was all up to Moses, but did he forget that this was a journey God was taking him on? Did he forget that God was the one directing them through this trial by trial on the way to the promise? He is directing you through trial by trial to the promise he has for you. He's got you this far. He'll get you further. He's got you through some junk up until this point. He's going to get you through the junk that's coming around the corner. Pressure's off. You don't have to hold it all together. Time to call your problem what it is. It's God's problem too. The second thing that I think is absolutely incredible about this passage is the pressure was real, but it can be shared. I know what you're thinking because I've thought it as I sat through sermons like this, right? Like, hey man, like I get it. Sounds inspiring. I got real problems. It's my bank account that's going to crash and burn. It's my kids that are going to suffer if I let something go. I can't let it go. I can't stop. I got to do more. I can't let anything down because the pressure is real and it sounds so abstract and good when you're talking about it. But right here in the valley, it's tough. Like maybe you have some pressure. It's real pressure, just like the pressure from Moses was real. Real lives, life and death consequences in the valley below. People he cared about and was responsible for. Listen, the pressure is real. It's okay. The pressure is real, and what you're going through is a big deal. But it can be shared. In Galatians 6:2, it says this: carry each other's burdens, and in this way you fulfill the law of Christ. The law of Christ can be summed up in two things. Jesus said this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. Interesting, in John, when he was talking to his disciples, he changed it a little bit. His followers, his people, his people on mission with him. He says, listen, you've heard it say, love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. I'm changing it. Love each other the way I have loved you. It's a big love. It's a crazy love. And it's how you love God. It's how you love each other. He says, this is how people will know that you're mine. Listen, you may have some real pressure with some real issues, with some real struggles going on in your valley, just like Moses. But man, your real pressure can be shared with other people who will come into your life and carry you through it, walk with you through it, be with you through it. And if you don't have people like that in your life, guess what? That's why God gives us the church. It's supposed to be a place where people encourage each other and carry each other's burdens and are there for each other. It's supposed to be the place that if your family stinks, you find a much better family in the family of God. If you struggle in friendship, you find better friends in the family of God. It's a place, a community God gives us. When you look back through Moses' life, it wasn't just the staff. When Moses said, God, I can't go before Pharaoh, he gave him the staff, and he gave him Aaron as a spokesperson. When he walked through the Nile, he didn't walk through it alone. When God said, go hit the rock with the staff, he sent the leaders and the elders of Israel with him. When he set him up on the mountain, while Joshua was fighting, he sent Aaron and Hur. You don't just need God. God gives you people too. You are created for community. The third thing that I think is absolutely powerful about this section of the story is others will pick it up if you put it down. This is the hardest part. Putting it down, letting it go, it's the hardest part. Because that's the moment where you actually have to make a decision to let go of the expectations and the pressure of feeling like you have to be everything and you have to hold it all together and allow other people into your life to start to carry things that you've been carrying. But if you put some stuff down, other people will pick it up. And if they don't, it probably means one of two things. One, you got the wrong people in your life. Build some new friendships with some people that love Jesus and will walk through you with it. Or two, it might mean that you're carrying the wrong burdens and God doesn't want you to have anything to do with the burdens you've been carrying. If you put it down, people will pick it up for you. Moses has this inspirational moment, but to be honest with you, he didn't quite get it yet. He had inspiration, but he didn't make any real change to how he was going through his day-to-day life. And that's what scares me most about Sunday mornings, because you could come here and be inspired, but if you never end up changing anything about how you approach life, you never end up anywhere different or better. It's so important to implement the things God's teaching us. That's why relationships, you have a husband and wife, they get all emotional, they have this huge fight it's been building for a while, but they come to a place after the anger and the frustration and the fighting where they say they're sorry and they promise and pledge to move forward and to be different, but they feel better, but they never make any real change, and so they end up in the same conversation 3 months later. You have to start making some change to follow God to where He wants you to go. Moses, he goes after this moment that he should have had it all click. And he goes back to work, and his father-in-law, Jethro, visits him. Excuse me. Jethro comes to visit him with his family, and he's hanging outside the camp and learning stories about all God had done since they left Egypt. Moses goes out to visit him, takes a day off, a little daycation, like go hang out in the tent with his father-in-law. I know it doesn't sound thrilling to you who have father-in-laws, but for Moses, it was a good break from his routine, and nobody was with me on that one. So, he goes out and they spend all day in the tent talking about all that God had done. They come to this place where Jethro's like, that's an incredible story, man. God is so good. He's done so many good things. They have this incredible day just telling awesome stories about what God's doing in their lives. And then Moses goes back to work, and Jethro follows him. It says that Moses goes back to work, and the next day he took his seat to serve as judge for all the people. They stood around him from morning till evening. His father-in-law sees it and says, why are you doing this for all these people? And he says, because people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it was brought to me, and I decide between the parties to inform them of God's decrees and instructions. He has an inspiring moment that he should have realized I don't have to hold it all together, but he needed to make some changes to reflect that. And Jethro Moses' father-in-law, in one short sentence with a lot of practical help, says it's not good. Listen, the way some of you are living, it's not good. You don't have to hold it all together, and you need to start making some changes if you want to go from running thin to running full. And those changes have to be practical and helpful, and you have to identify what you can put down, what you need other people to pick up, and then you need to communicate it. Jethro gives him such practical instruction. You need to designate some people to hear all of these. You just need to hear the big things. They can handle this for you. They can give God's direction for you. You need to pull yourself out of the weeds so you can lead better. Real practical change. And then in verse 24, it says, Moses listened to his father-in-law. That may be the toughest part in the whole story. Like, I feel like I'd rather try to hold up the... No, it's okay. You guys clearly love your father-in-laws to death, which is touching. Very cute. 11 o'clock is the cutest service ever. It says Moses listened to his father-in-law. How humble. What an incredible stance. Where was Jethro when he stood in front of Pharaoh? He wasn't around. When he led the nation across the water on dry land, when he struck the rock, where's Jethro through all of these things? Where was Jethro? He could have easily said, you haven't been there, man. Okay, nice thought, thanks. I've been leading a nation through some incredible stuff. Nice thought, that's good. Put it in a card next time. I don't want to hear it. Who are you to tell me what I'm going to do different? And here this leader, this incredible guy with incredible experiences who could have said to anybody on the planet at that time, talk to somebody else, my batting average is way better than yours. He listened. There's three things we have to take away from this passage that's reflected in Moses that'll help you go from running thin to running full. No matter who you are, no matter what your position is, no matter what your status is, no matter what you've been doing with your life, these three things, if you apply them, will take hinge moments and they will propel you to the fullness God has for you. Number one, he didn't let it go to his head. He didn't let his position go to his head. He didn't let his experiences go to his head. He didn't let his wins go to his head. He didn't let his failures go to his head. He kept his head on straight and focused on God. Throughout the entire story, after he hits the rock, he gives praise to God. After Joshua's battle is won, he builds an altar to God. He calls this what God is doing. It never went to Moses' head. He was balanced and focused on the one who had given him the mission and the purpose to begin with. Listen, you got to stop letting everything go to your head, including your failures and including your wins. Your identity in God is so much bigger than the few things that you have crushed, and it's so much bigger than the few things you have destroyed in a bad way. I know crushed and okay. Don't let it go to your head. The second thing is be teachable. It's amazing how fast we think we have all the answers. Being teachable is an attitude. It's a spirit you carry with you. Being teachable acknowledges this. Listen, I know that I could learn something from every one of you in this room. I could. I also know you could learn something from everybody else in this room. Having a teachable attitude leads with that. I want to learn. I want to follow God better personally. I want to step more into His purpose for me. I want to do what He's called me to do better. And that means that I can learn from every person in every circumstance. Something about God, something about who I am, something I can use to move forward. Moses was always teachable. Proverbs 13:18. We don't have time to read it right now, but you should jot that down. If you struggle with a teachable attitude, if you think that your answers are always the right until somebody proves you wrong, if you struggle with making change because you think that your direction should be the one that's always everyone else is always following, check that out. Moses was teachable. The third thing about Moses that I think is so important for us to understand if our hinge moments are going to push us towards running on full is that he let people close. He let people uncomfortably close. You know, when I imagine the scene of Aaron and Hur coming alongside Moses and holding his arms up, I imagine what it must be like to play man-on-man defense on a basketball court outside on a 110-degree day against some guy who's hairy and doesn't wear a shirt. Like, that's what I imagine. It's gross. It's gross. The sweat and the smell of that moment, standing all day holding his arms up. I get the same feeling when in Romans, Paul says to the church, hey, like, greet each other with a holy kiss. I'm like, I don't want to do that. Have you seen some of you? Like, we're not going to do that at church. I'm not going to greet you with a holy kiss. Look at you, like, it's the same feeling I get with Aaron and Hur on the hill. You have to let people uncomfortably close. Some of you have never done that. You've never trusted anybody. Maybe it's uncomfortably close to your emotions because you're afraid that if they really see what's going on in your heart, they'll think you're broken beyond repair. Like, step out a little bit. Put the stiff arm down. Let some people close to you. Let them see the inner struggle, the turmoil, the questions. Let them know how much you've been carrying and how you feel about it. Let them know that you're running thin and heading towards running empty. Let them uncomfortably close so that you can get the help you need. The thing that gets in our way is pride. And call it whatever you want. Call it being a man. Call it being a strong individual. Call it being a go-getter. Call it being a high performer. Call it being a I take care of mine. Call it being stubborn. Call it whatever you want. But I'm going to call it what it is. It's just pride. And it's not getting you anywhere in life. So you want to go on thinking that you can hold it all together and not need any help, fine. But you're going to be stuck at the same point you're at this year, next year. You want to step in to what God has for you. You got to drop the stiff arm. You have to take help because we were created to carry each other's burdens. You got to be teachable. You can't let it go to your head and become arrogant or cocky or beat yourself up. And you got to start to let people close to you. Running thin is a space we all find ourselves in, and quite frankly, I'm sick of running thin. I want to run on the fullness that God has for me. I want to follow Him to that. I know I need help on the journey. And my guess is you do too. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you so much that no matter who we are, you love us unconditionally. As it says in Romans, nothing can separate us from that love, not heaven, not hell, not life, not death. Would you help us to be people that practice the same attitude as Moses? Help us to be teachable, realizing that we can learn something from everyone and every situation. Help it not to go to our heads when we have big wins or when we fail miserably. Help us to kill the pride in our lives and to let people close. We don't have to hold it all together because you are the one who holds it all together. So help us to let go of the things we need to let go of, to put down the things we need to put down. Help us to share the very real pressure we have to walk through. And help us to trust you in all of it. In Jesus' name, amen.